another time, yeah. I was out of town last week, so I didn't get the chance to watch it. I went through all of it. I was like, oh, do I want to go back? This is great, isn't it? It's like, I gotta just. Appreciate the thought of like, hey, that's why we choose. I'm gonna reprioritize. That's why I was. Learn. Gonna have one. Oh, shoot, I better log in. I think Jessica's locked. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because Doug's not gonna be here. Doug's out, so you can take that one. And Liz is out.
Yeah.
So, yeah. We can split out.
Yes, if you can. Are we good? Council will call this special joint meeting of the Meridian City Council and Planning and Zoning Commission to order, and we'll begin tonight with roll call attendance for City Council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll start with council members. Councilman Cavanagh.
Here.
Councilwoman Little Roberts.
Here.
Councilman Overton.
Here.
Councilman Whitlock.
Here.
Mayor Simonson.
Here. Next will be the roll call for Planning and Zoning Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Commissioner Garrett.
Here.
Commissioner Stoll.
Here.
Chairperson Lorcher.
Here.
Oh, sorry, Commissioner Smith.
Here.
Yeah. We do have a quorum of both bodies here, so we will go ahead and proceed. First item up is adoption of the agenda.
Mayor.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Any changes tonight? So I move that we adopt the agenda as published. Second.
Have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the agenda is agreed to. So with that, we'll move on to item one, which is development review staff report template, and I'll turn this over to Mr. Hood for any initial comments about everything and that item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Chairperson Lorcher, Planning and Zoning Commissioner, City Council members. Appreciate the time. You're going to hear from quite a few staff tonight, but I want to just set the stage for you here. Going forward, we're going to start off with Nick and Linda, although she escaped, it looks like, are going to kind of propose to you some potential changes that they've been contemplating to improve the staff report template. So we've had some conversations with council most recently about the SAT or service accessibility tool and some other things that really tie into where Kurt and I will then come up for the second half of that and talk about how we're going to potentially even help some of the formatting in the staff report that can help create that record and the decision-making process. So Nick, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. So here's kind of what that agenda looks like. So using and improving that staff report, and then Kurt and I will cover the next couple of topics. So I think with that, we'll let Nick go ahead and talk about that.
Okay, and just for a processing thing, since Caleb got the nice pleasantry formalities of getting everyone's name out in terms of just council and commission for reference, does that work? Or perfect, all right.
Mayor, Council, Commission, thanks for meeting with us today on this. So yes, really this meeting, I want to hear from you guys on what is working in the new staff report, what is not working for you guys. I have some proposed changes that staff has, as well as SAT. But I did want to hear from you guys on our staff reports. For one thing we are going to propose is some more tables for areas like specific use standards for multifamily. That is a long section, can make the staff report really wordy. Something I'm working on currently. I don't have a exact proposal for you guys today just because it is a lot to cover. But like tables for parking, open space, amenities to kind of help summarize some of the staff report, not only for you guys, but also for the development community and the public when they are looking at our staff report. Because I think that it's a tool that's not just used by us, it's used by everyone that looks at it. So I wanted to open up and see if right off the bat, if anyone had any suggestions as far as stuff they would like to see changed in the staff report or any suggestions. And if there's not though, I will start with what we have proposed as of right now. And it's going to be kind of an ongoing, improvement with the staff report.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Kevner.
maybe what I might propose is planning staff been working on this. Maybe Nick, if you and your team want to kind of present some suggested changes, and then that may capture some of my feedback. And so rather than repeat myself, wait for you guys to present. And if we've got additional feedback, maybe offered at the end, if that's okay with you.
President Kevner, that sounds great. I'll start off with it then. All right. So the SAT tool, as you guys know, it currently is, we've had some discussion on it, and I'm proposing, and I have an Excel sheet that I've been working on. The tool's not quite polished yet. So I just created a table for you guys to where essentially we have the criteria and then we provide analysis for why it's green, red. And I actually have an example at the bottom of the presentation that I'm going to show to you guys for what that could look like in the staff report. There we go. So this is what it would look like. We'd have that, and then we'd actually have analysis on location, all of the different categories that are on it. We have a breakdown of why it would be green, yellow, red. And then, some of the data is red just because we don't have the data, which would primarily be related to emergency services for police, because sometimes there's just not enough data, and that is why it's red. And that's what we would call out. And we would ask for, other departments to comment on this. We would be coordinating with other departments to help us with this, because some of it, I can interpret a lot of it and we can interpret a lot of it, but sometimes we're not the experts in that field, and we want to make sure we're presenting you guys the correct information. So if we didn't get, all the sufficient information with it, we will cite that in this section as well. But this is something that it could look like in the future staff report, where it actually does provide a little bit of analysis for you guys. Just to elaborate a little bit further on the tool itself. Yes. All right, sorry about that. So that was one. I'm also working on an Excel file that would kind of put that into an Excel and would come up with more of a graphic, but it would still provide the analysis. It's not polished yet, and I didn't want to present some that didn't look, isn't up to my standards with that. So another part of the staff report that I think that we wanted as staff is history going first in the staff report. The history is below the general overview, and some other sections can kind of get lost, in the wording. And we feel that on a lot of projects, the history of what was previously there is extremely important. So that would go up to the front, then the general overview, and then we're actually going to have a table for comprehensive plan policies that are relevant for each of the projects. That really kind of gets back to what the old staff report did and connects more with the comp plan and the comp plan policies that are relevant for that, and provides analysis on it. It would actually look similar to kind of what this is. It would have the comp plan policy on the left with the analysis on the right for each proposed project.
Mr. Mayor, for the record, Commissioner Perot has joined the meeting.
Welcome, Jessica.
Then on top of that, specific use standards for it. So creating tables for the specific use standards, especially for the lengthier ones like the multifamily. It's something that I'm currently working on. There's a lot of language and requirements that are in that multifamily specific use standard. And when we copy and paste that directly in there, it gets really wordy, and then you italicize our analysis, and for the general public, if I wasn't in this every day, I wouldn't probably look at it because it's just a lot to look at. So for me, I understand it, but I don't think it's very user-friendly for the general public. So that's definitely a priority. I'm currently working on it. I just trying to capture everything that is needed for that multifamily specific use standards, which is quite a bit. Qualified open space and amenities. So open space, amenities. So we have the requirement on the left, the proposed on the right, kind of just simplifies it as far as exactly what's the requirement in the code and what they're proposing. We will have a spot for analysis as well. So there will be some analysis for projects that require it. But if a project's meeting it and staff doesn't have concerns with it, we're just going to leave it in a table to simplify it for you guys to look at it and make it more user-friendly in that way. Same with parking, residential parking, non-residential parking. We have, typically we write it out. It can get kind of wordy in there. And we want to make sure it's as clear cut for you guys as possible to where this is the requirement in code. This is what's proposed. Are they meeting that or not? And there can be room for analysis on that as well if needed for larger, more complex projects. And part that I wanted to touch base with you guys. So on my side and on our side from planning staff, school capacities has become, I would say, an increasingly common issue through all the projects. So adding an actual section, not that we are the school district and we're going to provide in-depth analysis on it, but actually providing a section to where we can, reiterate what the school district, what the numbers are saying, do kind of encapsulize that into a better way, is what I'm trying to say. Really show that, if that is an issue, highlight that in the staff report more clearly and actually have a designated section for that. So those are really the main changes we have proposed. Another thing that we are working on with our legal staff is the findings and making our findings more complex. That is something that we are starting to integrate a lot more into our reports, and you'll start seeing that as, the commission recommendations start coming towards you. But really at the end, the recs that will be, or the findings, I should say, that will be the most beefed up are the ones after the city council or the decision-making body does make their decision, because we will be adding analysis from what conversations were had at that hearing and, how council or commission got to their decision. So that is going to be kind of what we're interpreting. And I think that kind of leads into what Caleb and Kurt are going to be talking about after us as far as, making those motions to help us kind of understand your guys' thought process and how you got there is really, and the deliberation that got you guys to that decision. We're obviously interpreting that, and we have the minutes to, best interpret that as possible for our findings. So that is another part of the staff report that you guys will see dramatically probably increase in wording instead of decrease, but we are trying to help make the staff report be more concise and to the point for you guys to where it's not as wordy as it is currently. So with that, I will ask you guys if you have any questions, comments, or, recommendations for staff at this time. This will be something that, like I said, is going to be ongoing, and we will continue to make changes to make it the best tool that we can.
All right. Thank you. Council, commission, questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Commissioner Orchard?
Nick, under the analysis portion where in the parentheses, for example, if you can scroll down a little bit more, up, or right there is fine. So number 1, structure and site design standards, parentheses, comp plan UDC 1138-19. Is that a link?
It is not a link, and Mr. Mayor, Commissioner, Council and Commission, it is not a link. It is the section of code that would be relevant. I'm actually, and that's where we've had some conversation as staff, at actually taking out the comp plan sections, because that's going to be a new comp plan. It won't say comp plan anymore. It'll just have the code sections, because the comp plan policies will be at the beginning of the staff report now that we feel are applicable to this development. So we'll be going through each of the policies. But as far as it being a link, we actually tried to remove links from our staff reports, because once they actually get published, if you click on the link, a lot of times they break and they're not actually usable for anyone other than staff. So that would be why we try to avoid links. And it's,
So may I have a follow-up question?
Council-
In regard
Commissioner.
to, so it's not a link, but I'm just thinking of the public who's going to be
Mhm.
looking at this. You know, we're not necessarily familiar with the UDC, specifically 11-3A-19. But then if somebody in the public wants to come up and counterpoint or even commend our recommendations or the findings or the analysis, I should say, will there be some kind of even asterisks to say you can find this here on the city's website or something like that? Because if we indicate that this is something they should look at and then have no way of looking at it, and I'm not necessarily for us, but for the public so that they can create testimony, I think that may be end up problematic if the link option is not going to be able to work.
yeah, mayor's council or commission council, I apologize. Yes, as far as putting a link in the staff report or at least putting instructions on how to find the code and the comp plan, I definitely think it's something we can incorporate into the template. As far as in each individual section that is called out, I think it would be best if it's in one spot and we, provide the problem is the links sometimes do change on the website or where it's placed on the website and then that breaks the link and then it's no longer usable. That's really the difficult part or the challenging part with putting a link in the staff report, but having, I think, directions on how to find it.
Right.
This is where you go on Meridian City website to this subsection, and this is the UDC. I definitely think we can incorporate that if that's something you guys are looking for. Definitely.
I think from the public standpoint, that would probably be because if they're here to create testimony on something that's untrue, and then they can go to the UDC or the comp plan or whatever and find out that what they're asking for is not part of the rules or is part of the rules, would take away a lot of the misinformation that may come up during testimony.
That sounds great.
And not necessarily having a link, but having a place to find it.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Caver.
When you asked for feedback, one of my pieces of feedback was that I think our staff reports. That better, Dean? Sorry. I'm still getting used to these new buttons. My perception is that our staff report functions like almost like a printable textbook. And I would like to see it more as like a homepage for each application where people are able to click through to the things they want, where it is more visibly favorable, right? And I know that the service impact tool is an example of something that I thought was really intended to be a net benefit. We've got some kinks to work out. I have some thoughts along that, but I think making it easier for the public, easier for Luke, easier for our planning and zoning commissions, particularly new ones, to be able to adapt and understand the decisions they're being asked to make as easy as possible is really the direction that I'm encouraging you guys to do. Now, I'm also keenly aware, like, you don't just wake up on a Tuesday morning and crank out a staff report and you're done by lunchtime, right? Many of these take a lot of time and a lot of effort, and I'm sympathetic to that and open to that feedback as to what that right nexus is. But a couple of times I've asked, who is the staff report really for? And let's make sure who maybe our top 3 or top 5 audiences are, and make sure that we're tailoring the report to meet the needs and expectations of those audiences. Mr. Mayor?
So just to follow up on, I think that the link and how it lives comment, because I think the challenge that you're going to have is if you make something that you think is going to be there forever and it's not because of a website change, a link change, a code change, how do you have a static yet permanent record intertwined into one? Is there a good solution to that? And what is the public record if you start doing that and modifying and changing that?
Mr. Mayor, it's an exceptional question. I think the answer is that it lives with everything that is included then in the quote unquote council packet, right? So everything that we are provided in the packet are clickable links. All of those things can be intertwined into the staff report. Back to your staff report is your homepage. Now, it may need to be a quote unquote cached section of a portion of our city website that is added in there. Again, that's a detail that I think is from a staff time to what is achievable. Is there a disclaimer? So if somebody accesses that, staff report 15 years later, they're being aware that, hey, some of these links may not work. I look at that though as less concern about the future challenge at the expense of a present efficiency.
Except for we have public records requirements, and if you produce something and you keep
Yep.
it, you have to retain it in its current place, and you can't let links not be there if they were part of it. So I think there's a balance here that we have to identify in what is okay to not be there and what can be there now, but maybe isn't there in 3 years.
Sure. And I think, Mr. Mayor, it could be, you see cities that do this, that they take a snapshot of their website, or they take a snapshot of those links, and all those links live live on a separate exterior format, so they are still be able to be achieved from a public record standpoint. So I think that these are fair and accurate obstacles, but not so insurmountable to get in the way of creating a more efficient staff report for the public council and commission.
Mr. Mayor?
Go to Commissioner Smith.
Yeah, thank you. I really strongly agree, and I'm trying to think, obviously at much larger government organizations have, their Library of Congress, and there's their own whole organizations dedicated to this. But I think there are things that you can do, like having, again, static or archived. I imagine, I guess what I'm getting at is the larger question, it seems like, is maybe preserving previous versions of the code. And that might be the larger kind of question mark and issue. And beyond that, I think it's a matter of kind of, you can use forwarding of the link or things like that. And I think that there's, not to get too into the weeds of IT and back end stuff, but I think there are ways to manage that. But I do agree that the broader idea of having kind of jumping off points, not even just for the public, but for myself as a commissioner, there are sometimes applicants who come in and say, well, the code says X, Y, and Z. And, sometimes they say, well, we think the spirit of the code means this, and without understanding it in the context or being able to, I have to go look up the comprehensive plan separately and say, well, actually kind of, it seems like it means more this, there's kind of time lost. And I think that sometimes that pulls me away from listening to the testimony as I'm trying to gather facts. So I think there's also an aspect of helping us do a better job of staying present by being able to more readily access the information. There's another benefit there. So I wholeheartedly agree. And I understand, there's a larger IT kind of conversation probably to be had, but I think to the extent that it's feasible and it's possible without, adding too much administrative overhead, I think would be super beneficial. Not just, I think, to the public, but to at least myself personally as a commissioner.
Mr. Mayor,
Commissioner Lorcher.
in regard to the links that have been mentioned, for staff to be able to put in links for every piece of analysis is tedious. I mean, to make sure that the staff reports, I don't want to create an undue burden when you're creating your staff report and you're sitting there being an IT person as opposed to being a city planner. So that's something that probably needs to be looked at as well. Not only do you have to insert the links, you have to make sure they always work and every single time. In this conversation, having a more of a place to go look for it as opposed to every single staff report having the links workable would possibly be a very big burden on planners because they're working on these every week. And those are the easiest things that can probably bog the whole process down. So I just want to kind of enlighten that they're planners and not necessarily IT people as well.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
maybe there's a happy middle ground. I appreciate everything you guys have done so far and what you're trying to do. But maybe there's a way we could just do a single hyperlink to the UDC. I mean, we got to give them credit that if we give them to the UDC, they can figure out how to get to 11-3A-19. And that way, it's just one link to that document instead of trying to make an individual link to an individual specific topic.
Further comments, questions, feedback?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
maybe a couple other additions, just because some things you touched on. For the service impact tool, I think, adding a fourth color for when we don't have data with a call out as to, hey, here's a reason why we aren't able to provide that data, whether it's a unincorporated area with no calls for city services, so we can't quantify what's going on. Just so, hey, it's different. Here's what makes it different, because things are going to make different for depending on the application. I think that would be really helpful. I love the idea of the history. I think including, important dates as to when, modifications, rezone requests. The other piece that I think is important with that, again, trying to be sensitive to staff time, is maybe a rezone request came in 8 years ago and was denied. And then a subsequent rezone request came in 2014 and was approved, and now they're coming in for yet another rezone request. Plat extensions. I think things like that, to really give the council a flavor, like what is the true history of the activity of this application before the body, would be really helpful.
Maybe an additional service impact tool component that, and maybe this happened once when I think you guys talked about this once when I was gone, and so maybe it's irrelevant, but I know these were for illustrative purposes only, but who decides what the yellow is? I think council should determine what they think is a yellow versus green versus red. In your example, you gave a 3 to 7 minute wag on this. I don't know what council's expectations are on response times for a yellow versus a green versus a red for illustrative purposes. And I think that should at least be something this council determines. Is it 5 minutes? Because those are big wags. If it's a 3 minute response time and you're doing a yellow, or a 3 minute get to time and it's a yellow, it's a big wag.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Kavner, maybe you guys already talked about that.
No, I think it's a fair question, and here's the challenge is you have a council who then becomes subjective, and what is yellow today may not be yellow next year, which may not be yellow
Which
5
we
years from now.
require, I think, an annual or every 2 year review for,
Okay.
should it be updated? Is council still okay with this value
That seems to make
assessment?
Okay, that seems to make a lot of sense.
Additional, Councilman Overton?
Agreeing with both of you. I like your assessment, but I also like the fourth color. I'd sure like to see a black that signifies no data, instead of having the default for no data being to red, because that really throws off us, and I think it throws off the public.
I agree.
Mr. Mayor,
Commissioner Smith?
one I think small tweak that might be helpful, and I think this is more maybe dummy proofing the staff report than anything, is some sort of link or direction directly to public comment, right? Kind of maybe alongside agency comments or somewhere. A lot of the times I find myself, I guess, personally getting to public comment by accessing the link at the end of agency comments that says where they're stored, backing out to the home application folder, then going into public comments, because that's just the easiest thing. And so I think it might be helpful, at least, again, not the end of the world, but a minor time saver, to have something that's maybe a little bit more, again, dummy proofed, obvious that it's a link to public comments. But again, that's a small thing.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman
All right,
Kavner?
one more addition. On the location, I think it'd also be beneficial. This is a selfish request. What district is this application being housed in? Recognizing that every 10 years that may shift and change, but
Any additional questions, comments? Anything from staff?
Mayor, council, commission, we appreciate the feedback. We got my notes ready to go, and I will revisit this tomorrow morning, and we will see what we can do as far as I have some ideas. I might not be an IT guy, but I'm decent at working in Excel and Word, so I might be able to make it to where you can click on certain things, and I'll take you to that section of the staff report, like key issues at the top. I could link it to the portion of the staff report that shows the analysis and stuff. And stuff like that. So, and I can help our team understand some of that stuff. So I appreciate all your guys' feedback. I will I'll get on this, addressing it as best as I can, and you will start to see it slowly get rolled out with some of those changes. As we definitely in a couple months, I think we'll have it pretty dialed in. And at that point, I would love to hear your guys' feedback, even if it's not in a joint meeting like this. You can just send me an email, and we're happy to address to make this as user-friendly for everybody as possible. Because like you guys said, I'm in it every day. I know where to find everything, but 99.9% of people are not. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Nick. Appreciate it.
And Mayor and Council, as we transition then to the second part of this, realizing we don't have a ton of time, but want to make sure we get through it. I appreciate that feedback. I've let Nick and everyone else on the team, these are contemplated some fairly significant changes and some follow-ups in previous conversations. You might see some minor tweaks, going forward, and I've kind of empowered them to make some smaller changes to the template, if you will. But anything major, and I just heard the comments on, the red, yellow, green, and those tiers, and council maybe reviewing those semi-annually or whatever that looks like. So I think here in another few months, we'll at least bring back to council some of those changes to the template and then SAT. But anyway, so I guess without any lead up to the second effective decision-making, Kurt's the first speaker on that topic.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members, and commissioners. Kurt Starman at the City Attorney's Office. Thanks for having us here tonight. We're going to try to be concise and get through this pretty quickly. I know you have a full agenda both for the work session today as well as for your council meeting. So we're going to try to get through a lot of material in a short period of time. If I'm going too quickly, just ask me to pause. Caleb, you're going to drive the PowerPoint? Thank you, sir. So I want to talk about the first few slides are going to provide sort of the legal context for the remainder of our discussion, and particularly, as you deliberate and as you make decisions, as you ask questions, sort of some tips and thoughts about that. But that's all framed, I think, by kind of the first couple slides we're going to talk about here. That oftentimes when we're talking about land use issue, we talk about sort of three sort of important layers that all are interrelated. And that is, at the state level, we have the Local Land Use Planning Act, or oftentimes referred to as LUPA. I'm going to talk about that in a moment, and then more within our jurisdiction, but other cities and counties as well, as our comprehensive plan and the UDC. So I want to talk first about LUPA a little bit and what's been happening with the Idaho Supreme Court and why that matters to us and our decision-making and how you go about deliberating on these type of issues. This code section here, I'm not going to read in its totality. You can take a look at it when time permits, so I can elaborate if you like. But the gist of this section, which has been a focal point for the Supreme Court for the past 2 years, is a requirement in LUPA that basically says when you approve or deny an application, you have to have a sound reasoned statement that explains your decision. And you have to talk about the criteria that you used. In our case, typically that's a comprehensive plan and the UDC, but the criteria and standards that you relied upon, the facts that you relied upon, both from, from staff, but importantly from the applicant as well as from the public and any other facts that come into the record. And then you need to, and this is probably where we staff in particular, as we help you do your job, can do a better job. And that is to explain the rationale or to elaborate on the rationale, how you link those issues, the code requirements, the comprehensive plan, the facts that are before you, the project that's before you, and then your rationale of how you link those things that, yes, we're approving the project because, and fill in the blank, or we're denying the project because, and we need to fill in the blank. So this section has been taken up by the Idaho Supreme Court twice now in the past 2 years. These are the two cases you probably, for local government nerds like me, if there are others out there, you probably have followed this type of thing. The most recent case just was earlier this year. The official name of the case is Veterans Park Neighborhood Association, Inc. You probably know it better from the media as the Interfaith Sanctuary Project. That's basically the Boise homeless shelter. Has been in the news quite a bit over the past, say, 2 years or longer. And the court was very harsh with the city of Boise when the Boise Planning and Zoning Commission denied the project. The Boise City Council later approved the project. The Idaho Supreme Court, ultimately skipping some steps in between, reversed that decision and vacated the approval of that project and sent it back to the city. There was a technical reason for that, which we don't need to talk about today, but one of the things that the court really emphasized was that your reason statement is inadequate, and the penalty for that is your decision is invalidated. And so what if the court determines that you haven't satisfied that code section I had on the screen a moment ago, it's sort of the death penalty in the sense that your project, the approval is completely vacated, it's invalidated, you're back to square one and you're dealing with the project again, which is not good for the public or the city or for the applicant or for, anybody for that matter. The second case was from a couple years back. They didn't get as much media attention, but very similar, dealing with what's a combination of single family and multi-family homes in the kind of the northwest foothills area off of Hill Road. And for all the same reasons, the Idaho Supreme Court said this reason statement is woefully lacking and remanded it back, essentially kicked it back to the Boise City Council. Caleb, want to go? Again, I'm going to try to get through this pretty quickly here. In fact, I might just leave it at this, but basically what this slide is a quote out of that case, a holding from that Veterans Park Neighborhood Association case that essentially says what I just said. That's okay, no worries. So basically the conclusion that it didn't adequately explain. So we talked about, I'm going to leave it at that for now. The next slide is, make sure Caleb and I are synced up here. So this one is actually worth reading, so I'm going to read this one because we'll talk a little bit more about this one. This is a quote out of that case. When the decision maker, that's you all, when you do not explicitly respond to the factual and legal questions raised by the parties, and that means the applicant as well as the other affected parties, and by extension the public as a whole, because it all becomes part of the record, and it manifestly fails to provide an explanation as to how the application complied with the relevant ordinances, the written statement does not satisfy LUPA. And the continuation of that thought is therefore it's inadequate and therefore your decision is invalidated. So the penalty is quite strong. I wanted to use now to transition more to sort of a practical, how do we make use of that? How, as both council members and commissioners, I wanted to use, I don't want to get deep into the weeds, but I wanted to use sort of a recent project that is now fully complete. But I think it's kind of a good example to talk about. I'm going to use some In-N-Out Burger as an example, because I think the commission and the council actually did a really nice job with this one, and it helped staff ultimately to write a better reason statement that was more complete and more defensible. Quite frankly, there was some possibility of that being challenged in court. Now that did not happen, and In-N-Out chose not to seek a petition for review, but that was a possibility in that instance. So what I would suggest is if I'm in your shoes as a council member or commissioner, is a really nice place to start, even as you walk into the chambers that evening, but as you're listening to testimony, as you're asking questions, as you're deliberating, and in particular, when you're making motions and kind of putting the bones on, bones on the meat on the bones, pardon me, really helpful to focus on the findings that are in the UDC. And staff does a great job in all your staff reports. Oftentimes is sort of tucked into the back currently, but it's there. The findings that you're required to make, and they're very clear typically. And it's a good way to kind of think, kind of frame your thought process and how you deliberate and how you make your decisions. So for example, in the case of In-N-Out Burger, the three conditions in particular that were really front and center for the commission and for the council, as well as for the applicant, were, I'm just going to paraphrase these, but conditions about, is the project compatible with other uses in the general neighborhood? And another finding is, will it adversely impact other property in close proximity? And another finding that will it involve activities or operations that will be detrimental to any persons or to property? And so I thought the council and the commission did a good job of really focusing on those items. And you heard a lot of testimony from both sides, both the applicant who came with, I thought, a very polished presentation. They did a lot of research in advance, had consultants that looked at things like traffic and noise and light issues and so forth. And you had a lot of input from the public and neighbors, particularly from the apartment complex. A lot of information to consider. So, it's important, I think, as you kind of deal with those topics, if you can stay focused on those findings, and then, as you ask questions of the public and the applicant, and as you deliberate, and then ultimately formulate your motions, that is super helpful to staff, the planning staff, as well as the legal department, as we try to condense that material into written findings or the written reason statement, which is ultimately you all adopt. And that becomes the focal point. If we are challenged in court, that becomes the point of emphasis for the judge, or ultimately for an appellate court as well. So I think, that's a good example where I thought the council and the commission did it well. And you sift through a lot of material, and what the courts are very deferential to you as decision makers, is that as long as you check the boxes in LUPA that you've considered the facts, you've explained your rationale, you've explained why this evidence and this testimony weighs more or is more compelling and convincing to you than other evidence that might be to the contrary. Courts give you all as decision makers a tremendous amount of discretion and deference in that area. So the issue is not so much, you just have to explain how you got there and point to those facts. So that's a good example, I think, of maybe how you think about this as items are before you, projects are before you, how to kind of think about how you tackle those things and you formulate your motions. The other thing I'm going to mention, and I'm going to let Caleb take kind of the next piece here, is that one of the things that it's not on a slide here, but I wanted to mention it since I'm up here, is the other thing that LUPA requires, and you all did a good job with in and out on this one as well, is that in the LUPA specifically, explicitly requires you to say, if you are denying a project, you have to tell the applicant, what could they do, if anything, to seek to gain approval. So if you're denying this, it's not enough to say you're denied. It's you're denied for these reasons, explain it and have it to be defensible. But you also need, if it's possible, you need to be able to explain, here are changes you could make that potentially could get you approval. But I thought in the case of In-N-Out, really to say that succinctly, the answer to that question was you can eliminate your drive-through. You can have a sit-down restaurant. That would be perfectly fine with us. Drive-through is not going to work so well here. But I just want to kind of plant that seed with you as well. It's important to be able to describe to the applicant what they could do to gain your approval in the future. So I'm going to stop I'm going to pause there. If you have questions, feel free to jump in. Otherwise, I'm going to turn it over to Caleb to kind of now kind of link what I just said to our processes, how we do our reports, and ultimately what changes we might be or trying to make on our findings of fact, conclusions of laws, what we called them historically. The court calls them, and LUPA calls them, reasoned statements.
Yeah, I'll pause just to make sure there's nothing for Kurt, but he's available too if any time. Mine will be pretty brief, but if you want to interrupt for any reason.
You're being interrupted now, Commissioner Archer.
I have one, I'm sorry. Well, I'm not sorry, but what happens if an applicant is following the code? Because we hear this all the time in planning and zoning. We fit in the UDC requirements, we fit in the code. The number of units that we have in this application is approved based on your code. What happens if they're following the code, but we still don't think it's the best interest of the city?
Yeah, thank you,
Does
Council.
that affect the LUPA?
Thank you, council members and commissioners, Commissioner Lorcher in particular. So I'm going to kind of break that into two categories, or if it involves annexation, you have quite a bit of discretion because annexation actually falls outside of LUPA. So, decisions that fall under LUPA are things like zoning, platting, and issues of that nature. Annexation falls in a different part of state code, and it's not subject to the same rules in terms of petitioning the court for review. So in the case of annexations, you have, and courts have held that you have quite a bit of discretion on that. So if it's an annexation, again, you need to explain your rationale. We need to have a logical, cogent explanation of why for the denial, but you have quite a bit of discretion there. If on the flip side of that coin, if it is not an annexation, you're doing something more concrete like a preliminary plat, a rezone, things of that nature. Really, we need to have a good, you all, as you make your decision, ultimately when we condense that and put that in writing on a reason statement, we need to have a good reason that says, here are, the applicant thinks they met our requirements. We see it differently. We need to be able to explain, here are the requirements and here's why we found and we find that you have not met those requirements. If we just to finish the thought, if you say, yeah, we agree, you met all of our findings, but we still don't like it because that we're likely going to get, if we get challenged, we're likely going to lose that, quite frankly. A court would call that arbitrary and we would likely be on the losing end of that discussion.
Mr. Smith.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I have different question. And so I would say it seems like I feel like we do a pretty decent job when we state reasons for declining. Staff does an excellent job in findings about when we recommend approval or when we approve something, according to the staff report. My question is there, I know the answer for a lawyer is always it depends, but kind of with that caveat, one of the kind of scenarios I'm thinking of is if we sufficiently put modifications on the staff report. And that's something that staff hasn't covered in their findings. And maybe we might not think to list reasons. Is there ever a reason that you could foresee that we would need to give a reasoned statement or need to explain the modifications and how those might comply with UDC? Because that's something that we don't do now, and I'm just
So,
curious about.
Council and Commission, I think I think I understand that question. So yeah, I think number one, that's very welcome. That's part of it. It's an important part of what the commission does and what the council does is, staff comes forward with a professional recommendation based upon their professional knowledge of, state law, the comprehensive plan and our UDC. Ultimately, you are the best judge of what's best for our community and a judge of what, you're ultimately the decision maker. So modifications are certainly appropriate, welcome, and that's all fine. Again, there just need to be, we need to be able to defend those. And so we can't just be, make things up out of whole, from whole cloth or to arbitrarily create things. But to the extent, and this is almost always the case, I think, it'd be hard to think of an example not. When the commissioner or council makes modifications like that, it is to better comply with the comprehensive plan or better comply with the UDC. And so as long as it's in that vein and the modifications are fit within what the UDC requires, and there's a nexus or connection there that these modifications make it a better fit or make it so that we can approve this project, that's completely fair game.
So am I understanding right that I guess in Idaho law, the preceding conversation can be maybe used as explanation for the modification? So you don't necessarily, if you recommend a modification that sufficiently deviates from the staff report, to where they haven't analyzed necessarily the findings, how it complies, et cetera, the previous conversation leading up to that modification can be that we don't need to restate how that we feel like
Yeah,
that
so
complies.
council and commission, I think you're saying that sort of that either a previous hearing or maybe earlier during
Earlier in the hearing, yeah.
during the hearing that there was discussion about that and so forth. Yeah, I don't think you need to repeat all
Okay.
that. It'll probably be good business practice and makes my job easier and the planning staff's job easier if you make that connection and say, just briefly make that connection. I propose, or my motion includes this modification because, and fill in that blank, but just a sentence or two. You don't have to go into great detail, but it'd be helpful to explain, the modification of what we're trying to accomplish there.
Mr. Mayor, if I can just real quick piggyback on that answer from Kurt. I do think, and using the example in Boise, the court is not going to read the transcript. They said that in as much. So if you can pare that down to a sentence or two saying, we heard this, we heard that, and this is, you don't have to regurgitate everything you heard, but if you can sort of summarize that, I think that's what the court is asking for. So you can't just rely on, oh, we talked about that and what was going through my head when we talked about it. No, someone, whoever the motion maker is, or as part of that, hopefully can tie that together a little bit.
Perfect. Thank you.
Just
Okay. Commissioner Pearl.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. So I feel like the council does an excellent job explaining to the applicant and the public kind of what the role is of the decision makers with the different applications. So, what's permitted in an annexation, what's permitted in development agreement, rezone, plat, all those things. And I've tried to do that in our commission hearings, but I feel like I don't do it very succinctly. And I wonder if there's a way for us to either sort of mention those things when the chair is giving the initial presentation, or perhaps staff could, during their staff report, sort of explain to the public if it's a narrow kind of decision that we're making if we're just approving a preliminary plat or something like that. I think that helps the public record as a whole. Also helps as we're having each of these individual applications for us to kind of stay on track in terms of the, how we're using those facts to make that decision. So curious to hear the staff and council and commissioners' thoughts on that.
Mr. Mayor, maybe I can kick that off for start. We've had some conversation. I was actually going to bring that up as I run through a couple of these slides, but under that first bullet there, so there's already some, for a lot of projects anyways, there's some outstanding issues. And so one of the thoughts we had as staff is after we're done with our presentation, applicant's presentation, is to put that slide when it gets time to deliberate and discuss and say, hey, going into this hearing, these are the 3 things that we knew were sort of outstanding issues. more may come about through the public hearing. So you need to take some notes too, please, and address those as they arise, if they arise. But at a bare minimum, you need to address the applicant's request for condition 1.4.3B. So that's a thought that we've had, and maybe even trying to keep a record during the hearing for you, but we haven't quite committed to doing that yet. At least the known ones going into the public hearing, I think will help set the city up for success, including the decision makers that are getting ready to make a motion. So hopefully that helps a little bit. It's not going to be fully, bow wrapped around it and put it on a platter for you, but we do prepare the draft motions and keep the outstanding issues in front of you. And so if you can kind of marry those things with whatever you've heard, will help us create the written record of whatever the decision is. Does that help?
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Ms. Hood, if you just want to continue on then.
Yeah, real quickly. I think, so a lot of this is familiar and I won't read it. But I do think some of this is practical too, right? I mean, some of what Kurt covered is, well, what can I do to be compliant? And even your questions were sort of like, give me real life things that we can do to comply type of a thing. So these ones are sort of done. I think you all do it, but it is there. Just, listen, right? Doesn't mean you have to agree with everybody, but please do give them your attention and listen to the public testimony. I want to just highlight, and Kurt touched on it a little bit, but you still have discretion too on a lot of these things, right? You have discussion, deliberation, and some discretion. You're the decision maker. You get to weigh those things. But we need to, have some general consensus, right? And so that's part of what that deliberation is. And I'll say you guys do a great job of having that communication. Hey, this is kind of where I'm at, what I'm thinking, all those things. That helps with even creating that record for the findings. Hey, they acknowledged that this concern came out from the public testimony. Here's our code. This is what we're deciding in that matter type of a thing. So, air those things here, I guess, a little bit. I didn't create this slide, but the silence means consent. I would say if you don't agree with something, have that conversation a little bit. Let's see. I'm going to move again, moving pretty quickly. And we covered a lot of this. I just covered the first bullet here. We prepare some draft motions. Again, consider all the evidence. Any references you can make again to the comp plan or the UDC and how you got to deciding what's in the best interest of our community. And I'll just highlight that again, Kurt mentioned it, but the findings at the end, right? If you're looking for or against some things that will help give you some of the ammo, the findings tease you up for that. So if you can make them in the affirmative or not, it should be tied back to something within the findings. If you're really looking at approval or denial, it should be documented somehow in the findings, but at least you know what the finding is that we're supposed to make there. I will just point this out, and maybe this is Commissioner Pro, I think, does a fine job, although maybe sometimes it's a little longer, but longer is better in my opinion. The fourth bullet there, we have to prepare again that written decision. And so don't take offense though if sometimes we raise our hand and go, can you clarify? What did you mean by when you said this? Or we heard conflicting testimony on the fence height. Does your motion mean it's 6 feet or 8 feet or no fence or where? So we are just trying to, again, create that record. And so we're listening, and apologize if we miss it, but we want to make sure that everything is covered so we can, again, create that that clear record for everyone if we need to recall it. And then maybe these rules, and I won't spend too much time on it, but, and I'll just tie the first sub bullet here under findings of fact and conclusions to the link conversation we had during the staff report format stuff. I think we can talk about that some more. Certainly, we have all the users in mind. We want the code to be accessible, right? So understandable, but if we can get you there and you're not frustrated before you get there, it's going to help you understand the code requirements, not just our appointed elected officials, but the public as well. So we will definitely play with that so it helps people to get familiar with it. And I think I will move on from there. So just, again, a lot of this has already been covered. We will document a lot of this for you, especially the individuals that testified, and again, setting the staff report template up. So it really is almost just a copy and paste from what happened. And then we can put it in the new format that looks similar to the in and out example or the facts and findings, conclusions of law document. So I think with that, hopefully that's helpful, but that was kind of what we wanted to address today. And if you want to spend a little more time on questions, but I know you have another meeting, council. So I appreciate the time from both bodies today. Yeah, thank you for your attention.
Council, commissioners, additional questions,
Mayor.
comments, Councilman Cameron.
Got two, one for Mr. Hood, one for Mr. Sturman. Caleb, recognize accountability is what we do for people, not to people. So hold the council, the commission accountable a little bit. Are there themes or reoccurring bad habits that we are making that are making it more challenging for your staff? Recognize our planning staff, as talented as they are not mind readers. Are there things that we should be self-aware of as we are making motions, as we're deliberating, that is causing pain points or challenges for your staff?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question, but in reality, I think both bodies have come a long way over the years. And again, we're trying to give you tools to be successful. If you're successful, we're successful. So that's why I said we're not trying to be rude if we do interject from time to time. And it's like, hey, remember the applicant asked if you could modify this question, and some thought like you did and you didn't, and your motion, it was either unclear, you didn't address it or whatever. So we're trying to get your back in you helping us create the written record. So, but no, I think you do a good job, I think, of taking notes and giving us most of the time what we need. And if you don't, we'll again raise our hand and say, help us out here. We're not quite sure what this means, or that's too ambiguous, or don't punt that. That needs to be decided now, because we won't get to be able to resolve that without that direction at this point in time. So again, appreciate the question, but I think generally we're fine with what you're doing in the notes and how you're deliberating and the motions you're making. So thank you.
Mr. Marathon, Strumman,
Cameron.
Kirk, I want to talk real quick, and this may be more for council, about conditional use permits. And some of the direction that we've received over the years is that the council, by and large, has to approve a conditional use permit. If a council member or the council disagree with the conditions, do we create additional risk or additional major risk to the city if we add additional conditions to satisfy the issue that may be presented?
Yeah, council and commissioners, I think you have some latitude, particularly with conditional use permits. So what the LUPA says, and also what the courts have said, is that really that's an opportunity. It's permitted, but with conditions. And so what LUPA says is you can even go beyond your explicit code in placing conditions to make this use appropriate. So you have some latitude there. Again, my sort of a similar response to a question that Commissioner Smith asked, a little different context, is they ought not be arbitrary. There should be, and you should be able to, number one, there should be a link to what we're trying to accomplish and how this would make it a project that could be approved. And we should be able to explain the rationale for that. So it shouldn't be something just pulled out of the air. There should be some thought and rationale behind it. We should be able to explain that, and we need to. But I think that's very defensible. And a court would typically recognize that the council or commission has the ability, particularly with conditional use permits, to condition the project to fit what's being proposed and the area where it's being proposed.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Where'd that come from?
Can I bring up one more thing back to Councilman Cavanaugh's previous, and this isn't necessarily a complaint, but maybe it is something to implement. Just the potential after the motion is made and seconded, just to make sure that things are covered with stuff. I mean, maybe just to check in with legal staff, planning staff. Hey, do we, I mean, you do that from time to time, but I don't know if it's like a standard practice. Does it look like, did we address everything? Did we cover it? Are we, that type of a thing? I don't know, just a thought. Sorry.
Council, commissioners, any additional questions, comments, feedback? Well, then with that, I just want to say thank you for everyone for coming in, especially the P and Z coming in earlier this evening, and for the dialogue and the conversation, and turn this over to Councilman Cavanagh for any motion or last comment.
Mayor, just one quick comment and then a motion. Just truly, I want to commend our Planning and Zoning Commission. You guys are, I swear, the best Planning and Zoning Commission that I have been able to follow after, and you've made our life so much easier. You do a lot of hard work. My wife giggles because I talk to you all when I'm watching your meetings on the Planning and Zoning from home, and it's because I'm encouraging and supporting the great work that you're doing. So thank you for making our lives easier and for serving in our community. And that, Mr. Mayor, I move we adjourn our special meeting.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We are adjourned. And council, as soon as we can
Thank you.
get P and Z down, we'll restart the next one and we'll go till 5:45. So we'll get whatever accomplished we can in 10 to 15 minutes.
Chris, do you have an agenda for us for this one?